Hello friends, and welcome back to another episode of Lynch Paints, where I, Lynch, will be showing you all how to paint the most Eastery themed chapter, question mark, the Raven Guard. You know, ravens, birds, eggs, Easter. It's a long stretch, but it's the only one I could really find. And so let's grab our paintbrushes and our leftover Easter chocolate, and let's dive straight into this. However, before we get started, we're going to need a selection of paints, and these are all the ones I've used in this video today, and alongside which we're going to need a basing brush, we're going to need a medium-sized brush, a knackered old little tiny brush for all those metallic paints, and of course a teeny tiny brush for all of those teeny tiny blazes. So we're going to start out with a nice black acrylic primer all over the model, and also just did a nice simple easy head swap to the Corvus Mark pattern beaky helmet, just to make it more fitting with the Raven Guard. So then going to grab some of this Abaddon Black and Incubi Darkness. So we're going to mix the two together with a medium-sized brush. We're going to want probably a 50-50 mix for this one. And then we're just going to thin it down with some water. And then we're just going to apply this all over the armor panels on our miniature, which is pretty much, yeah, everywhere really. Unless you wanted to save maybe like a knee pad and paint that in a white, it doesn't really matter. It's entirely up to you which parts you want to leave behind to paint in a different colour. So once the first layer is done, what we're going to do is that we're just going to keep on adding in more and more of our Incubi Darkness using our wet blending method, and then we're going to start just to work in smaller and smaller areas until we have a nice smooth build up of the tone between the black and this lovely Incubi Darkness. I don't want to build it up too much because, of course, you know, predominantly it is pretty much an entirely black suit of armour, but we can show off some of that colour with some bright highlights if you wish at the end. And of course, you know, the helmet is going to be white, but it doesn't matter at this stage. You can paint it the same with this wet blending method. If you're new to it, then of course you can always just practice on the helmet, because we're going to be painting that white anyway, so it doesn't really matter if you get it wrong. Now that we've built up our black armor to a really nice level, I'm going to be using just pure Incubi Darkness. I've got a much thinner brush, and then what we're going to do is that we're just going to do a bit of a heavy highlight going over some of the armor panels, and then with this I'm just going to kind of plonk it on, and then afterwards we'll pick a finer detail brush, and then we'll go over more of a extreme highlight to the look. And remember just to keep your paints nice and thinned, because it may show up quite bright there, as you can sort of make out. Once it's dried, it will become sort of less vibrant. So if you're kind of panicking, thinking, "Whoa, this is too bright," then don't worry, because we're putting it on nice and thin. It should be alright. And if it is a bit too bright, then because it's such a thin layer, you can always just add in just a little bit of your Abaddon Black into the mixture, just to make it a little bit darker, and it should turn out just fine. Okay, so we're going to move on to the finer highlights, and I've got some of this administration grey, and of course I've got our wonderful teeny tiny brush, as we're going to be using it for all of these teeny tiny places. So I'm going to mix this into the Incubi Darkness. That looks a little bit too bright, so I only want like probably a smidgen of the grey in with this. just a little bit. I mean, honestly, it does depend on how bright you want your highlights. So you can always just add in more of the grey into your mixture. So I'm just going to very carefully just start to go back over some of these areas where we have highlighted before. And of course, because we're using a much finer brush this time, we'll be able to get a much neater finish. And then with the heavy highlights from before, all we got to do is just aim just for the middle, and then that creates a nice little, almost like mini blended effect with your highlighting, which can look really, really nice. So we'll see how it turns out, but it should be pretty darn good. And of course, you can highlight as much or as little as you like. I'm just going to highlight up to a point. I'm not going to bother doing too much and highlighting everything, but if you're that way inclined, then go ahead. Just keep on highlighting until every single edge, recess, probably not recess, edge of recess has been meticulously highlighted, and you are happy with the result. Now that we've got all the highlighting stuff done and out of the way with, we're going to then focus on the weapon. So mixed in some Abaddon Black with some Storm Vermin Fur, and then we're just going to go over the kind of the panel areas, if you know what I mean. So we're going to disregard like the hand grip and the other kind of metallic-y areas. I'm just going to focus on the body of the weapon, and then we're just going to give that a nice quick base coat over the top. Don't have to be too neat with it because, of course, it is a weapon. It's meant to be a little bit rough, a little bit ready. And then we're going to switch over to our teeny tiny brush, and there's paint down there. Okay. Then I'm just going to blend that in a little bit, and then we're just going to highlight the edges. And just before we move on to our metallics, I'm just going to grab this Mournfang Brown and Abaddon Black, mix them together, and then we're going to just do the belt. Just running around the waist here. And yeah, thin it down with some water. Give it a bit of a 50-50 mix, and then once it's dried, we can then go back up at the top, just kind of around the edges even, and highlight it with just pure Mournfang Brown. You can step up a little bit if you like, so you can add in a little bit of grey, just to make it a bit brighter, and you can always add in some textures onto it, some little scratches here and there. And the easiest way to do that, or rather the best way, is just to use the same paint as you've done for the highlighting for the scratches. There's some kind of little, odd little nicks here and there, if you like. Moving on to the next stage, we're going to grab some of this Iron Warriors Metal Silver, and we've got this sort of knackered brush, because there's one downside with the metallics. Because of the teeny tiny little flakes that makes the metallic sort of shiny, it can and will knacker up your brushes if you don't treat them nicely. So best thing to do is, because everyone has at least one really knackered brush, is just save that as your metallic brush. And this is what this one is. So I'm just going to go over, just doing a bit of a heavy dry brush, just over the top of all these little areas all over the model. And then if you want the metal areas just to pop, we can grab some of this Runefang Steel, which is a really nice bright silver, kind of like a chainmail. And then we're just going to use this just to highlight just a few areas. Again, this is optional. You don't have to do this if you don't want to. But it will just make some of the areas really shine. So moving on to the faceplate. I've got this Administratum Grey and a medium-sized brush, and we're going to use this just to start out to build up to that nice bright white. Doesn't really matter if you do end up getting some of the paint into the little vents in the side, because the Corvus helmet is a bit of an older sculpt. The details aren't as crisp as the newer sculpts, and they're not very deep. they're quite shallow, so you'll inevitably just end up going into them regardless of how much you try. But we can always just drop in a little bit of null oil if you want to, just into there, or just water down black. Same sort of thing, does the same job. So in order to get a smooth finish on the faceplate, we're going to need the layers to completely dry in between, so I figured we're going to do one of the trims. So we've got Abaddon Black and the Fist on red, and our medium-sized brush from before. Going to thin it down with some water, and then we're just going to go around the trim on this shoulder pad. So they tend to, with the Raven Guard, just have the one shoulder pad in red. You could do both if you wanted. I'm sure that there are various different companies within the Raven Guard that maybe have like a green shoulder pad, or maybe like a lighter blue or a gold or a silver, whatever. It's entirely up to you how you want to go about painting the shoulder pad. So I'm just going to go with the red just for now. Oh no, I've gone on to the grey. Never mind, I can tidy that up later. So first coat done, and then we're just going to add in more of our red just to bring the colour up to a nicer, brighter shade. And because we have our paint that's nice and watered, it means it's going to blend rather smoothly into what we've got going on. Cool. And then we can give this a little highlight as well. I'm just going to rinse that off. And then we can just, if you've got orange, happy days. If not, you can just lob in just a little bit of yellow, just to make your red a little bit brighter. You don't want to add in white, because then you're going to end up with a pink. So moving on back to our little faceplate, so we're just going to add another layer of the Administratum Grey. And then once this is dried, then we can start to build up our shades by just adding in just a little bit of white into the mixture. Now, because the armour is very dark, even this Administratum Grey is showing up a lot brighter than it should be because of the contrast between the two colours. So you could always just have it as Administratum Grey and leave it as that, but you can always just use it, the white, to intensify your contrast. So I'm just going to switch out to our teeny tiny brush. Just going to mix this into the grey, and then I was going to use this just to highlight, do a little bit of wet blending, and then I'm going to use it just to ink into the little side vents in there as well. Now, while we have the red and also the black, we're then going to do his eye lenses. So, using our teeny tiny brush, we're just going to mix the two together. I'm just going to fill out the majority of the lens, just leaving the back part black, because we're going to add in a tiny little white dot once we are done, just at the back of the lens, just to show, not the camera, sorry about that, just to show a real nice reflective look. So we're then going to mix in some more red, pop it into the first half, and then rinse our brushes off using pure red, and then we're going to add it into the first quarter, third-ish. Mix in just a little bit of yellow just to make it more of an orange, just for the final little bit at the front. And then we're going to pop in a little bit of white at the back, just to show off that reflective look. So then, our miniature, Raven Guard man, is pretty much finished. But of course, there is one final thing left to do, and you know what it is. We're going to be doing the logo freehand style onto this shoulder pad here. So I've got the Administratum Grey, and I've got the lovely white scar. I'm just going to pull up the image of the Raven Guard logo, just so I've got a good reference picture. I've got my teeny tiny brush for all of these teeny tiny places, and of course, keep your paints nice and thin, watered, and such, and we're just gonna go for it. And so this is how I went about painting Raven Guard for your Space Marine armies. It's been a interesting one to do. I mean, the black armor has really turned out very nicely. Gotta be honest, the icon on the shoulder pad, it's not been my best, and I highly recommend, if you're not that confident in freehanding, just buy some transfers or some shoulder pads that have got the icon that's raised on them. You'll save yourself a lot of time and a lot of stress doing it that way instead. But if you're feeling confident and up for it, then definitely give it a go. I don't know if I'm going to be attempting another one to try and improve. Unless I start a Raven Guard army, of course, then I probably will, but I doubt it. So if you're looking to pick up some Space Marines for yourselves, then look no further than Wayland Games. I have an affiliate link for them down in the description below if you want to go check them out, and you can save yourself between 10 and 20% off for Games Workshop products, as well as a whole host of other card games and board games and the like to tickle your hobby fancies. There'll be some stills and reels of this miniature over at my Instagram page at Lynch Paints if you want to follow me out over there as well. And thank you ever so much for sticking with me right to the end of the video. And if you're new, then thank you ever so much and welcome. If you want to just consider hitting the like button and the subscribe as well if you enjoy this video, and if you're new, leave a comment down below. Did you enjoy this one? Is there a different way that you personally paint Raven Guard? I would love to hear it. And as well, if you want to consider perhaps leaving me a little super thanks, then the button is down there for your consideration. And without further ado, stay safe, stay beautiful, and we'll see you all next time.